In 1980, The Shining turned the Overlook Hotel into the most terrifying place in movie history. But decades later, the greatest shock wasn't inside the haunted hotel. It was the real lives of the cast themselves. Hidden family secrets, devastating illnesses, shocking disappearances, and heartbreaking deaths changed them forever. Let's revisit the cast then and now in 2026, because some stories are even harder to believe than the film itself. Shelley Duvall as Wendy Torrance. Shelley Duvall was born on July 7, 1949, in Houston, Texas. At 31 years old, she played Wendy Torrance, the terrified wife and protective mother desperately trying to save her son from the growing danger inside the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, 1980. Her unique screen presence had already earned critical acclaim through collaborations with director Robert Altman, including her Cannes Film Festival Best Actress win for Three Women, 1977. Yet away from the cameras, happiness often seemed frustratingly out of reach. Her marriage to Bernard Sampson ended in divorce in 1974, and a later relationship with singer Paul Simon also ended painfully. Although she eventually found lasting companionship with musician Dan Gilroy, the couple spent much of their later years living quietly and modestly in rural Texas. The most heartbreaking chapter unfolded after she stepped away from the entertainment industry. By the 2000s, Duvall was battling serious mental health challenges, and in 2016, many viewers were outraged when a highly publicized television interview exposed her fragile condition to millions. During the broadcast, she made troubling statements that revealed how deeply she was struggling, sparking widespread criticism of the program. In her final years, declining health left her dependent on a wheelchair as she battled complications from diabetes. Shelley Duvall died on July 11, 2024, at the age of 75. Though her final years were difficult, she left behind an unforgettable legacy through The Shining, Three Women, Popeye, and a body of work that continues to be rediscovered and celebrated by new generations of film fans. Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance. Jack Nicholson was born on April 22, 1937 in Neptune City, New Jersey. At 43 years old, he played Jack Torrance, the troubled father and aspiring writer who slowly descends into madness while caring for his wife and son at the isolated Overlook Hotel in The Shining, 1980. By that stage of his career, Nicholson had already become one of Hollywood's most celebrated actors through films such as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Chinatown, Batman, and The Departed. Yet while audiences admired his larger-than-life screen presence, a devastating truth was waiting just outside the spotlight. In 1974, a Time magazine investigation revealed that the woman he believed was his sister, June Nicholson, was actually his biological mother, while the woman who raised him as her son was his grandmother. Even more heartbreaking, both women had died by the time he learned the truth, leaving him with questions that could never be answered. As the years passed, Nicholson gradually withdrew from public life. After his final film, How Do You Know, 2010, he disappeared almost entirely from Hollywood, fueling widespread rumors that memory problems and possible dementia had forced him into retirement. However, in April 2026, photographs released by his daughter showed the legendary actor celebrating his 89th birthday with family and friends, appearing alert and engaged. For us, Nicholson remains one of the most honored actors in cinema history, with 3 Academy Awards, 12 Oscar nominations for acting, and a legacy that continues to define generations of filmmaking. Danny Lloyd as Danny Torrance. Danny Lloyd was born on October 13, 1972, in Chicago, Illinois. At just 8 years old, he played Danny Torrance, the young son whose psychic abilities allow him to sense the terrifying forces lurking inside the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, 1980. Although his performance became one of the most iconic child performances in horror history, Lloyd's experience on set was carefully controlled. Determined to protect him from the film's disturbing content, director Stanley Kubrick convinced the young actor that he was making a family drama rather than a horror movie. As a result, Lloyd had no idea he was starring in one of the scariest films ever made until he finally watched it as a teenager. Even with that protection, the lengthy production schedule and demanding filming process proved exhausting for a young child who had grown up far from the pressures of Hollywood. As the attention surrounding The Shining faded, Lloyd quickly realized that life as a child star was not what he wanted. After a small role in the television film Will G. Gordon Liddy, 1982, he grew frustrated with constant auditions and the fierce competition of the entertainment industry. At 14, he made the unusual decision to leave acting behind entirely and pursue a normal life. Instead of chasing fame, he focused on education, earned a master's degree in biology, and built a successful career as a biology professor at a community college in Kentucky. In 2019, he made a brief cameo appearance in Dr. Sleep, the long-awaited sequel to The Shining, as a tribute to fans who had never forgotten the little boy riding his tricycle through the halls of the Overlook Hotel. Today, at 54 years old, Lloyd remains one of Hollywood's most famous one-film child actors. He married Jessie Diana Brackett and built a peaceful family life while raising 4 children. His story is always the lesson for us to know how everything in Hollywood has worked to make a success with a child. Scatman Crothers. As Dick Halloran. Scatman Crothers was born on May 23, 1910, in Terre Haute, Indiana. At 70 years old, he played Dick Halloran, the kind-hearted head chef of the Overlook Hotel who shares Danny Torrance's psychic gift, known as The Shining, and risks his own life to rescue Danny and Wendy from Jack Torrance in The Shining, 1980. The role became one of the defining performances of his later career and introduced his warmth and humanity to a whole new generation of moviegoers. Away from Hollywood, Crothers shared one of the industry's most enduring love stories. He married Helen Sullivan in 1937, and together they raised their daughter Donna while standing by each other for nearly 50 years. Their interracial marriage survived decades of prejudice and social hostility during an era when such relationships often faced discrimination, yet the couple remained devoted until the end of his life. Another heartbreaking challenge arrived in 1985 when Crothers was diagnosed with lung cancer. Despite the illness, he continued accepting acting work whenever his health allowed. As the cancer spread to his bones, he endured constant pain, but still determined to keep working for as long as possible. Beyond The Shining, he also starred in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, voiced Jazz in the Transformers the movie, and charmed audiences as Scat Cat in Disney's The Aristocats. On November 22, 1986, Scatman Crothers died at his home in Van Nuys, California, at the age of 76 from pneumonia and lung cancer. His remarkable legacy continues through more than 5 decades of achievements in music, film, television, and animation, while Dick Halloran remains one of the most beloved heroes in horror movie history. Philip Stone as Delbert Grady. Philip Stone was born on April 14, 1924, in Leeds, Yorkshire, England. At 56 years old, he played Delbert Grady, the former Overlook Hotel caretaker who murdered his wife and 2 daughters before returning as the hotel's chilling ghost in The Shining, 1980. With his calm voice, piercing stare, and unsettling authority, Stone delivered one of the film's most unforgettable performances. Director Stanley Kubrick valued his remarkable screen presence so highly that he cast him in 3 masterpieces: A Clockwork Orange, 1971, Barry Lyndon, 1975, and The Shining. Stone also appeared in Indiana Jones and The Temple of Doom, 1984, and numerous acclaimed British television dramas, earning a reputation as one of Britain's finest character actors. Ironically, the very qualities that made him so memorable also became one of his greatest professional obstacles. Even after decades of acclaimed work, Stone remained one of Britain's most respected yet underrated performers, rarely receiving the recognition enjoyed by bigger stars. Away from the cameras, Stone lived the opposite of the frightening men he portrayed. He shared a long and private marriage with his wife, Margaret Stone, deliberately keeping his family out of the public eye. As his health gradually declined in the late 1990s, he quietly stepped away from acting in 1999, after more than 4 decades in film, television, and theater. Rather than seeking publicity, he chose a peaceful retirement surrounded by family and close friends. On June 15, 2003, Philip Stone suffered a fatal heart attack in London at the age of 79. Although he never pursued celebrity status, his performance as Delbert Grady remains one of the defining moments in horror cinema. More than 4 decades after The Shining, his calm smile and haunting words continue to send chills down the spines of audiences around the world. Barry Nelson as Stuart Ullman. Barry Nelson was born on April 16, 1917, in San Francisco, California, to Norwegian immigrant parents. At 63 years old, he played Stuart Ullman, the polished but mysterious manager of the Overlook Hotel who hires Jack Torrance, despite knowing the hotel's disturbing past in The Shining, 1980. Calm, sophisticated, and quietly unsettling, Nelson gave the character an unforgettable presence. Yet that distinction did not translate into lasting movie stardom. His career stretched across more than 6 decades, and he is forever remembered as the first actor ever to portray James Bond on screen in the 1954 television adaptation of Casino Royale, 8 years ahead of Sean Connery. He also appeared in productions such as Hudson's Bay, The Twilight Zone, Murder, She Wrote, and earned a Tony Award nomination for the act on Broadway. Despite making history as the original James Bond, Nelson found his greatest success on Broadway and television. He starred alongside legends including Lauren Bacall and Liza Minnelli, performed in acclaimed productions like Cactus Flower and 42nd Street. His personal life brought both happiness and heartbreak. His first marriage to actress Teresa Celli ended in divorce in 1965 after 14 years together, as demanding careers gradually drove them apart. Years later, he found love again with Nancy Lee Hoy, whom he married in 1992. The couple divided their time between homes in New York and France, enjoying a peaceful life after Nelson stepped away from acting following his final Broadway performance in 1986. On April 7, 2007, while traveling through Bucks County, Pennsylvania, Barry Nelson died unexpectedly just 9 days before his 90th birthday. He was 89 years old. From becoming the very first screen James Bond to building one of the longest and most respected careers on the American stage, Barry Nelson secured a place in entertainment history that continues to endure. Joe Turkel as Lloyd. Joe Turkel was born on July 15, 1927, in Brooklyn, New York. At 53 years old, he played Lloyd, the mysterious bartender who serves Jack Torrance drinks and quietly fuels his descent into madness in The Shining, 1980. With his piercing eyes, calm voice, and unsettling presence, Turkel created one of the film's most unforgettable characters. Just 2 years later, he delivered another iconic performance as Dr. Eldon Tyrell, the powerful creator of the replicants in Blade Runner, 1982. Although he appeared in 2 of the most influential films ever made, his name never achieved the same recognition as the stars around him. That irony followed him throughout his career. Turkel worked alongside some of Hollywood's greatest directors, including Stanley Kubrick in both The Shining and Paths of Glory, 1957. He built an impressive resume with films such as The Sand Pebbles, 1966, Blade Runner, and dozens of television appearances. Yet while audiences remembered the movies, many never learned the name of the actor behind those unforgettable performances. The lack of recognition and financial rewards often left him feeling that character actors were the industry's forgotten backbone. As the years passed, Turkel became increasingly candid about the hidden struggles of life in Hollywood. In his final years, he completed a memoir titled The Misery of Success, where he described the harsh realities behind a seemingly successful career. The book explored industry politics, financial uncertainty, professional disappointment, and the emotional toll of spending decades in legendary productions while remaining largely invisible to the public. It was a deeply personal reflection from a man who had spent much of his life standing just outside the spotlight. By the time he reached his 90s, Turkel had outlived many of his contemporaries and become a living link to Hollywood's golden era. However, his health gradually declined, and on June 27, 2022, he died in Santa Monica, California, from organ failure at the age of 94. Today, film fans still revisit those haunting scenes, proving that sometimes the most unforgettable faces in cinema are not the ones whose names appear above the title. Anne Jackson, as the Doctor. Anne Jackson was born on September 3, 1925, in Millvale, Pennsylvania. At 55 years old, she played the compassionate doctor who examines Danny Torrance after his terrifying visions and reassures Wendy during the family's nightmare at the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, 1980. Her role success was built through years of dedication rather than overnight fame. Widely regarded as one of America's finest stage actresses, Jackson built an extraordinary career that began with her Broadway debut in 1945. She earned a Tony Award nomination for Middle of the Night, won an Obie Award for The Typists and The Tiger, and appeared in acclaimed productions such as Lovers and Other Strangers, The Tiger Makes Out, ER, and Law and Order. Alongside acting, she later taught at New York's HB Studio, helping shape the next generation of performers while continuing to accept select television and film roles well into her later years. Her greatest partnership, however, was away from the spotlight. In 1948, she married acclaimed actor Eli Wallach, and together they raised 3 children while balancing 2 demanding acting careers. Their marriage lasted an extraordinary 66 years, surviving the pressures of Hollywood, constant travel, and decades of tabloid speculation. Instead of drifting apart, they became one of the entertainment industry's most admired and enduring couples, frequently appearing together on stage and screen. Wallach's death in 2014 marked the beginning of Jackson's final chapter. Although she remained surrounded by family, her health gradually declined over the following 2 years. Anne Jackson passed away peacefully at her Manhattan home on April 12, 2016, at the age of 90. She left behind a remarkable legacy as one of America's most respected actresses, remembered not only for her unforgettable performances, but also for a life defined by artistic excellence, devotion to family, and extraordinary grace. Tony Burton, as Durkin. Tony Burton was born on March 23, 1937, in Flint, Michigan. At 43 years old, he played Larry Durkin, the friendly garage owner who helps Dick Halloran obtain a snowcat in his desperate attempt to rescue the Torrance family in The Shining, 1980. Burton's commanding presence came from a remarkable athletic background. He was a Michigan Golden Gloves champion, an outstanding high school football player, and later competed professionally as a boxer, finishing his career with a record of 10 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw. His promising future nearly collapsed after a series of poor decisions led to a prison sentence of more than 3 years for robbery. Instead of destroying him, prison transformed his life. While serving time at Chino State Prison, Burton earned his diploma, studied through the University of California, and discovered acting through a prison therapy program. That experience gave him a new purpose and eventually opened the door to Hollywood. After his release, he steadily rebuilt his career with roles in Assault on Precinct 13, Frank's Place, Hook, Twin Peaks, The A-Team, and dozens of television series. Away from the cameras, Burton found stability with his wife Ray, whom he married in 1980. Together they raised 4 children and built a close-knit family. However, tragedy struck in 2014 when their son Martin died suddenly from a heart attack at just 43 years old. The devastating loss deeply affected Burton as his own health continued to decline. The final chapter of Burton's life was marked by repeated hospitalizations as complications from chronic pneumonia gradually weakened him. On February 26, 2016, he died in Menifee, California, at the age of 78. His journey from championship boxer to prison inmate and ultimately to one of Hollywood's most respected character actors remains one of the industry's most inspiring stories of redemption and perseverance. Barry Dennen as Watson. Barry Dennen was born on February 22, 1938, in Chicago, Illinois. At 42 years old, he played Watson, Stuart Ullman's professional and attentive assistant who helps manage the daily operations of the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, 1980. Gifted as both an actor and singer, he also appeared in productions such as Fiddler on the Roof, Batman, the animated series, and numerous television dramas. Yet behind the successful career stood a man struggling to find peace with his own identity. One of the most significant relationships of his life was with a young aspiring singer named Barbra Streisand. During the early 1960s, the two were virtually inseparable. Dennen encouraged her career, helped arrange performances, and believed in her talent before the rest of the world did. But as Streisand's fame exploded, he found himself facing a painful realization about his own sexuality. The emotional conflict, combined with watching someone he loved become one of the biggest stars in America, left him heartbroken and emotionally adrift. The aftermath proved devastating. Struggling with depression and a growing sense of isolation, Dennen eventually left New York and spent more than a decade living in London, trying to rebuild his life away from painful memories. Although he continued working steadily in theater, television, and voice acting, including roles in Fiddler on the Roof, Batman, the animated series, and numerous British productions, he never fully escaped the feeling of being overlooked despite his remarkable talent. He never married and often preferred a quiet, independent life far from Hollywood's spotlight. Then came a tragic ending. In June 2017, Dennen suffered a serious fall at his home in Burbank, California, resulting in a traumatic brain injury. What initially seemed like an accident soon became a life-threatening medical crisis. After months of hospitalization and declining health, Barry Dennen passed away on September 26, 2017, at the age of 79. His life was marked by extraordinary talent, unfulfilled love, personal battles, and a resilience that carried him through decades of triumph and heartbreak. Leah Beldam as the young woman in Room 237. Leah Beldam was born on June 17, 1944, in Switzerland. At 36 years old, she played the mysterious young woman who emerges from the bathtub in Room 237 and seduces Jack Torrance before transforming into a horrifying, decaying corpse in The Shining, 1980. Although her screen time lasted only a few minutes, the sequence became one of the most unforgettable and disturbing scenes in horror film history. However, the role came with considerable pressure. Agreeing to perform such a bold and psychologically unsettling scene under Stanley Kubrick's exacting direction exposed her to criticism and public scrutiny that many performers preferred to avoid. The attention generated by the film never persuaded Beldam to remain in the spotlight. Her personal life was marked by romantic ups and downs, including marriages to George Beldam and later Frank Manning. As the years passed, she increasingly distanced herself from public life, declining interviews and avoiding the growing cult fascination surrounding The Shining. Eventually, she returned to Europe and embraced a life of privacy, far removed from the entertainment industry. Leah Beldam died quietly in Switzerland on July 23, 2021, at the age of 77. Leaving behind one of the most haunting and unforgettable images ever captured in a horror film. David Bakst as Forest Ranger 1. David Bakst was born on December 28, 1946. At 34 years old, he played Forest Ranger 1, one of the park and forestry employees attempting to maintain communication with the isolated Overlook Hotel as the deadly snowstorm cuts off access to the outside world in The Shining, 1980. While his role was brief, Baxt built a respectable career through a long list of supporting appearances in film and television. Like many working actors, he rarely received leading roles, but became a familiar face in productions such as Superman, 1978, Batman, 1989, and numerous British and American television projects. His career reflected the reality of thousands of performers who quietly helped bring major productions to life without ever becoming household names. That path came with constant uncertainty. Unlike major stars who could rely on large salaries and long-term contracts, Baxt spent much of his career moving from one small role to another. There were periods when acting work became so scarce that he reportedly relied on additional jobs outside the entertainment industry to support himself and his family. The pressure of balancing financial stability with artistic ambition became a lifelong challenge. By 2026, at around 80 years old, he is believed to be living a quiet and private life away from public attention, remembered by film fans as one of the many unsung performers who contributed to some of cinema's most iconic productions. So, which member of the Shining cast surprised you the most, and whose story touched you the deepest? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this look at the Shining 1980 cast journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable cast reunions and the latest updates on your favorite classic movies. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Goodbye.